Jeff Little, welcome.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. How you been?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Wonderful. Um, you live in DC, right?
I do, yes.
Well, tell me, is it crazy there? Because I've been staying away from
You
there.
know, it's been I haven't had anything that I've noticed in terms of what's going on in DC. There's just mostly just seeing what's in the news and things like that. So no visible signs of much change down here in DC right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, because I saw like it's always like that. They it always looks a lot worse on TV.
yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't been downtown much, so I can't really speak
Yeah,
to
they
what.
I saw some
Yeah,
videos about
yeah,
these FBI agents in Georgetown of all places.
yeah.
Georgetown, which is crime ridden, right?
Sure, yeah. Down around the monuments and
And
stuff. I think
destitute and
maybe.
everything. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's it's interesting.
No,
Let's start. You took advantage. I'm gonna say you took advantage because I think of the deferred resignation. I have another friend who did the same thing, and he was sort of a little anxious before, and so he called me and we talked, and I said, "Look, you're
sure.
young enough. You're not gonna get another chance like that. You're gonna get 6 months to just sit down and
Yeah.
think about what you're gonna do next." Well, tell me how has that been?
It's worked out very nicely for me in my sort of personal career journey. So I was at HUD for 15 years in a variety of roles, and I thought about leaving a bunch of times. I'd work on something for a few years and kind of be ready for the next thing, and would think to myself, oh, I should get out there somewhere else in the housing world, do something a little bit different. And every time I almost did that, some new opportunity would come along within HUD that would kind of entice me to stay. So a couple years ago, when I was going through one of my phases of trying to pack up my belongings and make my way out of the building, I had the really exciting opportunity to be the General Deputy Assistant Secretary for Housing. It's kind of like the senior career official in the Office of Housing for the FHA, and the commissioner at the time, the Federal Housing Commissioner at the time, Julia Gordon, kind of uh, did a nice job of pitching me on coming to work with her in that role. And I said, okay, I'll do this, but really, this is it. This is the last job I'm going to do. And then I'm going to go, I'll do this for a few years and then I'm going to go do something else. And so I had kind of been planning to leave in 2025 anyway. That had always been the plan. And
Nice.
so when the deferred resignation opportunity came along, and for folks who may not know exactly what this meant, was the Trump administration and the Doge folks, they were looking to try to downsize the federal workforce. And so they offered anyone in the federal workforce, look, if you agree that you'll resign later this calendar year, you can just go on leave right now, take some time off, and then you can resign in September or December, depending on which
Yeah.
the rules for different people. And that worked out great for me because I was ready to go anyway, and I said, okay, I'll take advantage of this. I stuck around a little bit longer than I needed to because I wanted to make sure that I was passing the baton effectively and kind of taking care of some things before I went out the door. But it's been really, really fantastic to be able to have some time with my family and do some things and really take a deep breath before I figure out what I want to do next. It's also for senior government officials, it can be tricky to job search while you're doing your performing your duties as well, because you have to recuse yourself from any kind of policy matters and things that impact your potential employers once you start talking to them.
Yeah.
And it can be really limiting to try to figure out how you can still do your job effectively and also be doing a kind of good, rigorous, thorough job search. So to be able to sort of just leave my position and focus on a job search without any of those constraints has been an incredible luxury. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
been a little tough to kind of see all of the knowledge walk out the door at HUD, and I've been trying to stay in touch with them and figure out how things are going. And so I have some concerns about that, but for my own personal career journey, it's been really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand. I understand why you had to stay a little bit longer because you managed like I don't know, 2,600 employees were under your umbrella, so to speak, and
Yeah,
so
we had. I mean, the Office of Housing is the biggest office in HUD,
yeah,
and it includes the Federal Housing Administration and all of its components, as well as a bunch of rental assistance programs and housing counseling, manufactured housing. There's healthcare programs that are part of the FHA world. And so it's a big shop all over the country, 2,600 people. There was a lot going on, and a lot of turmoil, obviously, with the administration changing over, and all the things that kind of were happening in the first part of the year. It was very, very busy, so it was hard. Even though it made sense for me to leave, it
Yeah.
was a challenging time to step away.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, you put your heart into it, and so you care.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, in the short term, there's short term, medium term, long term. Obviously, in the short term, what do you think the effect will be on? Let's say let's pick one, which is I'm really interested in, which is senior living, affordable housing for seniors, right? How do you think in the short term the impact will be, and how do you think it's going to evolve if this kind of policy remains in place?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of different kind of trends or things that are happening, and it's a little. I have a lot of uncertainty, I think, as do others, about exactly where things will go from here and where we
Yeah.
are. The dust certainly hasn't settled. Most recently, there was obviously a bunch of concern about some of the proposals in the president's budget for how they wanted to kind of completely rethink some of the rental housing structures. I was not surprised that Congress didn't go for that, and it seems that the sort of basic funding approach for rental assistance, including for seniors, is going to remain intact for the time being. There's obviously still some pretty serious concerns about ensuring that funding is protected, both this year and then into the next few years. There's a lot of pressure from the Trump administration and the Republicans in Congress to try to cut funding, and so there's going to be a lot of tough challenges to figure out exactly how to make sure that funding stays in place. In terms of on the HUD policy side, it does remain to be seen. I mean, we've had strong support for senior housing programs, across administrations and across all the different changes on the Hill. So I still think that like the core the core elements of how we do senior housing at the federal level are going to stay in place. The question is going to be whether we have good opportunities to expand and provide additional support for all the people that are not sort of currently reached by the federal housing supports right now.
Yeah.
So we still have a lot of work to do in that space. Obviously, there's complicated things going on in the cost environment in terms of being able to continue to operate those properties and do development successfully. It's been the inflation has been a huge factor everywhere, but especially in the housing industry. And then there's a lot of concerns about capacity at HUD and capacity at state and local governments as well. With all the changes both in various funding streams, and then with all the departures at the federal level, I don't know that we really know yet exactly what the impact of that is going to be in terms of HUD's ability and the state and local partners' ability to deliver and continue to sustain appropriate levels of oversight and appropriate levels of support and problem solving and monitoring of what's happening in all these properties around the country.
Yeah.
So we'll all be watching that and trying to figure out how to work our way through it.
Yeah, yeah. You said you said a lot of things have remained intact, at least for now, in Congress, in terms of changing things. Why do you think that's the case? Is it just that, a lot of constituencies will be just upset by the changes, and so they want to play it, safe?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the existing programs um, do have strong, effective advocates
Mm,
in a variety of dimensions. That includes the state and local government entities that would be negatively impacted by any kind of some of the really intense changes that were being proposed and contemplated, as well as the various advocates for the tenants, for the owners, for lenders, there's all kinds of people impacted by some of these changes, and they've done an effective job of advocating. But I think more fundamentally, the the members of Congress understand that evicting a bunch of low income, vulnerable folks from their housing, especially seniors, is an unacceptable harm for the voters and for the people, and for something that I think most of them genuinely don't want to see happen in their communities for very direct and obvious reasons, but also the political downsides of that are pretty obvious. And so I think that there's going to be an appropriate amount of reluctance to do anything too disruptive in that space without understanding exactly what the transition strategy or plan would
Yeah,
be.
yeah.
So,
Well, seniors do vote, right?
of course, that's certainly part of it. Yeah, that's certainly
Yeah,
part of it.
and that's a great thing, right? That's one of the places where democracy works.
Yeah.
So do you think, because I always try to not demonize, say, I don't know, the folks I don't agree with. What's the sort of like, what are they trying to do in terms of changes that they believe, let's say the Trump administration, to the extent that they are thinking ideologically or trying or going for the greater good? What are they trying to do? Let's say, for example, I hear a lot of people saying we want the government to get out of financing and we want the private sector because the private sector is more efficient. Those kinds of
Yeah.
points. If we were to take them at their word, what is their argument about making these changes?
And I think there is a diversity of opinions and a diversity of approaches even within the Trump administration and within the officials. I mean, I've had lots of conversations with lots of different Republican housing appointees and officials, and there's not unanimity about what
Yeah.
they're after and what they seek. And I think it's still a little bit. Uh, we'll still see more of sort of how this evolves, but essentially, to focus specifically on the rental assistance side, the programs that support kind of low income and extremely low income folks with rental subsidy through public housing and through the multifamily programs and vouchers as well. There is a desire. There was a proposal in the president's budget to roll all of those programs essentially into more of a block grant to the states,
Mm.
and then let the states have flexibility to administer that funding how they wanted to administer it. But importantly, coming with a dramatic reduction in the overall level of subsidy coming from the federal government. And to me, I mean, this is probably a negative characterization, and it wouldn't be how they would pitch it. But it's clearly designed, in my opinion, to just cut funds. And if you just turn off the spigot of the existing rental assistance programs from the federal government, that very directly leads to people being put out on the street. It's
But
just
why
extremely
cut funds,
direct.
right? Why cut funds in the first place?
I mean, I think it's just an overall desire to downscale the federal government's
Right, right.
kind of. It's looking at the deficit, looking at taxes, and trying to find a way to shrink the size of government. And so, what they were proposing to do this block grant mechanism is kind of an attempt, in a lot of ways, to make it up to the states to figure out how to dole out the harms of that reduction. So it's like, look, oh, we're just going to grant this to the state, and if anyone ends up getting evicted, or if they can't
Not us.
continue to pay rental assistance funding, that was it was really the state's decisions about how to do that. And of
Interesting.
course, the
Yeah.
states, for the most part, many of the states, push back pretty aggressively on this approach, and that's a big part of the reason why it didn't happen. There's also a lot of, it's a little less relevant to the senior housing discussion, but they are looking a lot at work requirements and tenure limits for public housing residents and for voucher holders who are working age and work able. The there's still a lot of uncertainty about whether or not they'll be able to move forward with much of that. Some of it requires some statutory pieces, and Congress would need to cooperate. But that continues to be something that I know the advocates and the housing providers are watching very closely to see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what's the thing about the American political system is that it swings back and forth. So once this is over, whatever they did maybe will be undone, right, to a certain extent, right? Or have you seen, given your tenure, have you seen something along the lines of, okay, these guys do this thing, it really is not undone in the next administration. It's just, yeah,
It's a great question. I mean, it really, there's a tremendous amount of variety, right? So if certain things that are done as administrative actions by the agencies, they issue new guidance or even just new interpretation of existing guidance, or take certain administrative actions, those kinds of things can be undone very quickly and easily.
Mm,
If they do things, or often they can, if they do things with regulation, where
mm,
they actually are issuing and finalizing
mm.
rules, that takes longer to undo, and it takes a lot of kind of resources in terms of personnel and time and political attention of an administration to undo a regulatory action. Obviously, anything that's statutory that requires Congress to act, those are the hardest things to undo. So anything that actually gets enacted into law, even if a new administration wants to change it can be extremely difficult for a variety of reasons. So
Yeah.
it depends, and that's not even getting into if systems have been changed,
Mm, mm.
if partners and recipients have changed their own systems and their own business practices to adapt to some guidance document or some change that was made at the federal level. It's not as easy as flipping a switch to sort of revert back to the previous approach. So the more that changes, even if a new administration wants to come in and undo it all, they have to prioritize and make decisions about what they actually can invest time and energy in changing. And it isn't necessarily as straightforward as just saying
Yeah.
on day one, okay, we're reverting back to the
Yeah.
2023 version of all these policies.
Yeah. No, I saw that with
Yeah.
transition from Bush to Obama, where a
Mm-hmm.
lot of stuff was expected to be undone and was not undone. Same thing with Biden and Trump, right?
Yeah.
And I think the
And,
lessons there. I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and I think it's also important to note that as a career official, um, who I was interacting with political leaders
Yeah.
across administrations a lot of the time. And in both directions, I often found myself in the position of trying to make sure that the incoming administration wasn't just throwing the baby out with the bathwater and getting rid of some of the things that the previous administration had done, right?
Mm.
So they would come in and say, okay, we're going to rescind this notice or we're going to rescind this mortgagee letter. And we would often want to say, well, hold on a second. I understand there's these 3 or 4 things in there that you really strongly object to and that you want to undo. But there's 5 or 6 other things in there that are less controversial and actually were good improvements, or
Mm.
that we think you might want to consider keeping. In the political world, there can be sort of a reflexive desire to sort of reverse decisions that were made by the prior administration. Thankfully, I've often been able to work with political leaders who were able to see things in a more nuanced way and find ways to say, yeah, well, we need to undo this, this, and this, but we agree, let's keep this piece and this other piece, and we can not just let's not just go backwards. Let's pick and choose and smartly move forward.
Yeah.
Sometimes keeping and sometimes reversing things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how about the flip side, meaning when somebody wants to innovate, let's say new administration wants to innovate and get rid of
Yeah.
stuff, do you have that same kind of a dialogue, I'm assuming, right?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, so a lot of my work was hearing political leaders and really really smart, thoughtful policy people coming in from academia, from think tanks, from advocacy organizations, who had really bold, great ideas about what they wanted to do, and my job was to help them translate that into something actionable at HUD. It's like help them understand we can easily do this. That's going to be a lot harder. If you want to do this, you might want to tweak it in this following way, or here's the language we should use, or here's the vehicle or the mechanism we should use to move forward. And also just giving them a reality check on what is and is not possible on what time frame in the HUD environment. There's been a lot of discussion about in the last couple of months about kind of the limits of state capacity and the limits of all of the different mechanisms in place in government that make it hard for us to deliver. My job was working to try to navigate that stuff and try to figure out how do we push through, how do we continue to find ways to get things done.
And I guess, I guess somebody like yourself, like way up the ladder and all that, would need to really understand the political context within which the
Mm-hmm.
person that you're engaging with, right? Like
Yeah,
what are the pressures, how much margin do they have in terms of what they can do and what they can't? Is that or are you dealing with the policy folks? You
yeah.
support the folks. In
It's
other words, how informed do you have to be about the political climate?
extremely informed and kind of read in on that stuff. It was extremely important, and you're right. There's a mixture of the two things. There's a mixture of the policy folks who are there in political leadership roles with very specific ideas about what they want to accomplish for like housing policy, and then there's those folks and the more politically kind of oriented folks are dealing with the realities of um, the pressures of White House messaging strategy and the pressures of like the campaign cycles, the desire to get things done in a certain within a presidential administration to build a kind of legacy accomplishments for cabinet officials and people in the White House and things like that. And so all that is part of the mixture. And if to be effective as a career leader, you have to understand that so that you can engage in so that you can provide useful advice
Yeah.
to the elected and appointed leaders, for one thing, but that also that you can help them understand, the trade-offs that that may be longer term that they need to be thinking about when they're tackling these things as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm assuming you do quite a bit of work with folks in Congress, right?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a lot of discussion, both in terms of whenever Congress is so in the budget process, in the annual appropriations process, we're regularly in touch with folks at the Office of Management and Budget and folks in Congress to clarify and make sure we have good information going in all directions about exactly what the funding needs are for like rental assistance renewals, for IT, for staffing, et cetera. We're kind of in dialogue with them to make sure that the budget is going to align with the necessary functions of the core programs, as well as with new proposals and new ideas. And then whenever there are policy bills or kind of new ideas moving to in Congress to try to tweak or modify or expand the programs, they will reach out to career staff at the agencies through our congressional relations office to sort of get the expert advice of the career workforce, the career leadership on, hey, we have this idea. Here's the bill language we've drafted. Would this work? And we are frequently in dialogue with them to say, well, actually, the way you've written this, it wouldn't quite work. Here's some suggested revisions, things like that.
Yeah, yeah. Let me ask you this. Uh, we have we have the private sector, we have local, I don't know, local government, state government, and federal government, right?
Mm-hmm.
So specifically, to the extent that you can help me think through this, senior housing today, who do you think is the main driver in terms of both money and in terms of policy? Is it the federal government or is it state, local, private?
So I think that there's no like one definitive here's the answer there, because it is a complicated
Yeah.
ecosystem where there's a lot of important players. When it comes to subsidized housing for the lowest income folks and the sort of most vulnerable populations among our seniors, there's no doubt that the federal funding is sort of the big piece of the puzzle for ensuring that those folks who have access to decent housing on a month to month basis. Like the federal funding is huge for that. Now there's a tremendous array of local officials, both and private sector partners who are doing the work on a day-to-day basis to ensure that federal money actually is achieving anything valuable. But the funding, a lot of it is coming from the federal government. However, we're not funding enough, and so there's a tremendous amount of unmet need. And because of that, and for all the folks who are above the income thresholds to qualify for the deep subsidy that the federal government can provide, it's really the local housing markets that dictate the bulk of kind of what is available to seniors, and that gets into all kinds of factors around local economies and local financing mechanisms, but importantly, local land use policies, zoning, permitting, et cetera, as to whether or not there's adequate housing supply to meet the overall housing market needs for the community, and then specifically to meet the needs of the senior population within those places. So it's you know, as I've been job searching and thinking about kind of where I want to go next in the housing world, it's been one thing is very clear. The housing world is humongous, and there's a tremendous number of different types of entities and different kind of angles that people have on this work. All of which is necessary to try to continue to make progress in meeting the need
Yeah.
for housing, which we're not fully doing yet.
Well, I mean, for me, it's good news in the sense that it's not like they can just yank stuff and everybody
Yeah,
collapses. It's more of an ecosystem that
there's a,
has maybe a lot more resilience than one may think.
That's right. There's a lot of interdependence. There's a lot of
Yeah.
resilience. There's some positive redundancies.
Redundancies.
There's some less positive redundancies too, that
Sure.
where we could find ways to more efficiently use resources. But I agree that overall there is some value to the resilience in this kind of decentralized
Yeah.
system.
So, I mean, you probably have right now the good problem of like, which of these possibilities do I go?
Yeah,
Is that how you're
yeah.
experiencing right now?
Yes, it's a little overwhelming. I was very lucky at HUD to get to work on a whole bunch of different policy areas in different parts of the housing world. A lot of work at FHA and the sort of mortgage insurance side of things, but then also senior housing, the deep rental assistance work. I worked on the rental assistance demonstration, which is about recapitalizing public housing properties and preserving it. I worked on manufactured housing and housing counseling. So many different things. So it can be it's been a little overwhelming to just kind of look out at all of the many wonderful people and organizations who are doing good work in this space, and try to figure out, where do I want to be? Like, how can I sort of best utilize what I'm good at to try to contribute to this mission. And I've got some ideas. Stay tuned. But hopefully,
Well, give me a sense
hopefully,
of in terms of what are the big things that are like, for example, I'm sure you want to have um, quality of life in terms of it measures, it gives you independence, right? To do
yeah,
the things you want to do. I mean, the thing is, I tell people who a couple of folks like I talked to who are in position, and I told you, they called me and like, what should I do? And I'm like, you know what? You're not going to get a chance again to get 6 months to think through what you want to
yeah,
do, right? You're sucked into daily, and you have
yeah,
opportunities and all that. So it's a great, I think, opportunity that not a lot of people get to be able to sit down and say, let me imagine my
yeah.
life. Well, tell me, what are the big sort of things that are influencing your thinking at this point in terms of the next steps for you?
I've just been trying to think a lot about, what am I good at in terms of what am I uniquely good at? Like, what's the value that I can provide that is maybe somewhat unique to me? And trying to think about, how do I want to grow? Like, what are the things that I would like to add to my toolkit, and the things that I would like to learn that would excite me,
Yep.
um, and then to figure out kind of um, where is the place where those things can combine, and in a way that will give me the opportunity to have the most impact. This is uh, I'm looking at kind of the back half of my career and trying to say, like, okay, I want to find the opportunities to do the things where when I'm done, I can look back and say, that was a really cool thing that I did, and
Yeah.
I'm really
Yeah.
glad that I was able to make that contribution. So just trying to find what those things are. There's a couple. I'm looking at the housing landscape too, and just figuring out, like, what are the things that are happening out there that would be exciting to be a part of. So for me, there's this sea change happening in sort of how we think about housing supply. Suddenly we've got, more so than we've ever had in my time working here, a really strong consensus that we need to do something about housing supply, that it's urgent, that we find ways to unlock more supply. So there's lots of action happening at the local level. There's the Senate committee marked up this Road to Housing Act, which is the first, and it passed unanimously out of committee. It's the first kind of significant housing legislation on supply that's come out of that committee in many years, decades even. And this is all because people are seeing, okay, we've got to figure out the supply side. So there's part of my my looking around and said, okay, how can I be a part of this movement to figure out how to unlock more housing supply? Coupled with that, okay, great, we've got political momentum on housing supply, but suddenly if you're successful in adding a lot of housing supply, you've still got a lot of people who don't have enough income and don't have the resources to afford the supply that's going to be coming online.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
what are we doing to sort of build momentum and build an ability to increase subsidy and find more effective and more efficient and just get more money to help create income supports and get people into housing so that everyone can benefit from that expanded supply and not just
Yeah.
the people who can afford it. Um, and then the third kind of piece that's interesting to me about this is, okay, we fix zoning, we fix permitting. In theory, we make it a lot easier to so that people have permission to build. How do we make it cheaper for them to build? What are the sort of technology innovations? What are the sort of financing changes that can be made so that people can get in, build housing, and have it not cost excessive amounts so that it won't pencil out in the long run?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at places and interested in people who are doing all of those different things.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're in a good spot. Jeff, Little, thank you so much, man, for making the time. I
Of
appreciate it.
course.
I was so lucky. I don't know how I lucked out and sort of bumped into you. I was,
I think we have Ethan Handelman to thank, my former
yes, yes,
boss at
and so I
multifamily.
gotta send him an email, say thank you so much
Yeah.
for connecting me with this very cool cat here.
Thanks so much. It's been great to work with you, and I look forward
So
to our more conversations.
wonderful. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Bye bye.